So, welcome to the talk. This is, as we keep saying, and I hope you start saying soon, a facilitated conversation. This is not a panel. As you might be picking up, have no interest in talking for very, very much because I don't have much voice left to talk with. So we're really going to need you all to step up. Our hope is that this is a safe space to ask uncomfortable questions, to dig into ideas that are either personal, related to your organization, or conceptual things that you've been wrestling with. And to kick things off, we're going to do a quick round of introductions around the room. And when I say quick, I mean I will be very polite and ruthless in cutting you off. But I would love if you wouldn't mind sharing your name and one thing that makes you uncomfortable. So I'm going to start. My name is Lauren Ellen. And one thing that makes me uncomfortable, I'm actually still learning how to talk about race.
I'm Steve Clift, and too many emails make me uncomfortable. I'm joking, of course.
I'm Tamir Novotny, and one thing that makes me uncomfortable is talking about race with people who don't know me.
My name is Sarah Rigdon, and I share that discomfort that you just mentioned a lot. Exactly.
My name is Willie, and one thing that makes me uncomfortable is recognizing my privilege.
Hi, my name's Fatma. Air travel makes me really uncomfortable.
My name is Eric, and I'm sort of out there in terms of most stuff, but I think really trying to I'm sort of a technical guy, and really trying to get out and talk to ordinary people and learn from them in ways that are a little bit less natural for me.
My name is, that's loud. My name is Carrie, and one thing that makes me uncomfortable is I have a hard time remembering people's names, and I feel like when I try to connect that if I don't know your name, I don't know a piece of your humanity, and so I don't know how to fix that.
Good morning, my name's Alicia, and one thing that makes me uncomfortable is claiming my own power.
Hi, I'm Gracie, and one thing that makes me uncomfortable is the politics of trying to include everyone.
Hi, I'm Denise, and I guess one thing that makes me uncomfortable is trying to balance the needs of my non-inclusive residents with those who are looking for it and trying to explain between the two.
Good morning, my name is Sheila. I'm more of the work behind the scenes, set things up, not be in front. And so being in front is something I'm very uncomfortable with.
I'm Tom Warshauer, and ditto to everyone else's discomfort. I think maybe that's what makes me uncomfortable, is having to figure out why I'm uncomfortable so early in the morning.
I'm Laura, and being around extreme inequality makes me very uncomfortable.
Good morning, I'm Brielle, and one thing that makes me uncomfortable is standing up as an ally for groups that I don't obviously identify with.
Hello, I'm Alicia, and one thing that makes me uncomfortable is when it's seen racial profiling and not always knowing what to do as a witness.
My name is Sasha, and there are many things that make me uncomfortable, but specifically, I think talking about race is one thing that's really tough.
Good morning. My name is Amy, and the one thing that makes me uncomfortable is talking about what I do with my own family and my community that's not in this space, and explaining why I'm not a lawyer.
Hi, I'm Diane from Code for Seoul, and what makes me uncomfortable is I actually work remotely. So I work the team in Seoul, and I reside in Canada. So what makes me uncomfortable is that if I am left out in the decision making.
Make sure we get the folks that just came in too in the back.
Hi, my name is Kevin. 5% voter turnout in my city.
Oh, I feel you.
Hi, my name is Dennis, and one thing that makes me uncomfortable is having to go back to snow to my hometown in a few days.
One more back.
Hi, my name is Wabzena Jafar, and nudity makes me uncomfortable.
I'm Tom, and pushing back on bad design decisions and bad technology decisions to people who live in countries that we used to be part of Britain's empire, that makes me uncomfortable.
Paul Kronberger from Madison, Wisconsin. What makes me uncomfortable is not knowing if we have adequate input into some of the things we do.
Hi, my name is Stepan, and talking about myself in early morning makes me uncomfortable.
Keep the right session.
So tell us about yourself. I'm Ron, and one thing that makes me uncomfortable is not being prepared.
Hey, Ron, behind you, Fiona.
Name is what?
Of not being prepared. So I'm supposed to say what I feel uncomfortable with?
And what your name is.
Yeah, I'm Fiona, and most of the times, although it's not very noticeable, I feel uncomfortable speaking in front of a lot of people.
My name is Carlos, and I feel uncomfortable making or sitting around with stakeholders and making decisions.
My name's Shannon, and status quo makes me uncomfortable.
My name's Nick, and being at a tech conference that's trying to solve a lot of community problems without a recognition of non-tech solutions makes me a little uncomfortable.
More behind you.
Paul Barham, and kind of mingling in crowds makes me uncomfortable.
Hi, I'm Diana Flora. Being dismissed makes me uncomfortable.
I'm Spike. Weakness makes me uncomfortable, my own and others.
My name's Jeff Mayer, and dealing with conflict makes me uncomfortable.
You think I'd have time to prepare, right? Hi, I'm Jill, and I guess holding this microphone right this very second is making me uncomfortable.
Hi, I'm Patrick, and making sure that the things I'm doing are actually addressing the problems that I see makes me uncomfortable.
Hi, I'm Bill, and being in a new city and not having a sense of direction makes me uncomfortable.
Hi, I'm Kate, and I would say that saying no makes me uncomfortable.
My name's Noah, and calling out the class privilege of those in power makes me uncomfortable.
Get in the circle.
My name is Molly, and I'm uncomfortable with how much I care when my coworker does social media for my organization.
My name's Bill. Sheila, I feel your pain. Microphones make me uncomfortable.
My name is Chris, and I would say that recognizing when I want to help someone but am unable to because I either don't have the capacity or don't know how to help them makes me uncomfortable.
Hi, I'm Gal. Going to public engagement sessions and having people think they know when they speak with the field makes me really uncomfortable.
Hello, I'm John, and any relationship not based on code makes me uncomfortable.
I'm Andy, and I think trying to break into a small group of people I don't know makes me uncomfortable.
I'm Scott, and for me, working particularly with kids from extreme backgrounds like extreme poverty or extreme wealth, and bridging those gaps makes me really uncomfortable.
I'm Marion, and generational profiling makes me uncomfortable.
Good morning, I'm Emma. Microphones make me uncomfortable, but also not knowing what the next step is makes me uncomfortable.
My name's Chris, and being in government, the speed of government, or lack thereof, makes me uncomfortable.
Hi, I'm Corinne. Everyday racism and sexism, really subtle kind, make me really uncomfortable.
Hi, I'm Leanne. I'm going to second the everyday sexism. It makes me really uncomfortable.
John, when you go, like when you're with your friend and they go to get a bagel and then you're standing in the coffee shop or the bagel place, makes me uncomfortable.
I understand.
Hi, Mario. I think I'm Mike. I think asking for help really makes me feel uncomfortable.
I'm Preston. Using aspects of like the things that make me a privileged person, like masculinity, being like a tall, loud guy, even if they're for something good, makes me uncomfortable.
Some folks come in that haven't introed themselves that either want to just like give a shout in the back. Yeah.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Chris.
Hey, Chris.
I presume we're supposed to talk about something that makes us uncomfortable.
Yeah, you got it.
I'm here from the state of Michigan, the west side of the state, but I'm still a Tigers fan, and Joe Nathan coming in the ninth always makes me uncomfortable.
Awesome. Hi, ma'am. If you wouldn't mind, we're just said our names and what makes us uncomfortable. Would you mind? I know. Ha ha! Don't do this. I'm so sorry that came across as hazing. That was not the intention. All right, well, it's really nice to meet all of you. Don't worry, we're not going to have a quiz on this. So I appreciated a lot of the themes, right? So some of the things that we were talking about here are our individual experiences. Some are shared social and cultural experiences. A lot are things that it's just really hard to wrap our minds around. I think that actually applies to all of the categories. But there's also kind of a resonant theme about what we actually do about it, right? Some of you have probably sat in a session that looks like this, where we go and we start sharing our feelings. Others have probably sat through sessions where we drill through a bunch of resources and then you get links afterwards that you're totally not going to read. So my goal for us is idealistically to not do either of those, realistically to get to a place where if we're at least link sharing, because I want to get us to a point where we are sharing resources or building relationships that we can use to hold each other accountable, to take this conversation back. I would say that even if in the frame of just dialogue, it's actually learning how to have these conversations in our institutions that really matters. But I want this to reflect whatever is the most useful for us here in this room. And so that I don't know if you have questions that you're burning to start with, but I thought I could kick it off by at least putting a little pressure on Preston to talk about how Code for America is dealing with some of these inclusion issues. I also just want to note in terms of the norms of our space, so we are being recorded. One, you should just know that. If you'd like to be off the record, just please say that before you make your comment. And we have this microphone, so we're gonna try and get it to you before you actually would speak, but I don't want this to be the limiting thing on our conversation. So let's be good at passing the mic, but know that if you really need to contribute and you're being respectful, you don't have to have the mic to speak. So Preston, why don't you tell us a little bit about how you guys are thinking about the brigades?
Thanks, Lauren Ellen. I'd be happy to. I want to ask one real quick question first, though, because I can see the perspective. Folks in the very back who aren't really in one people, one circle, can we push back and incorporate everybody so that we're shoulder to shoulder and we're not layered? Looks like there's some space up here next to John, and if we
there's some
pull
of these
out a
freaky
little
middle
more.
seats too.
Yeah, there's also weird middle seats. If you feel like being in the weird middle seats.
Then inner circle, we're going to model some privilege. Cool. So actually,
Awesome.
yeah.
All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and start with it. And to be clear, also we have a little bit shy of 40 minutes right now to have this conversation, which is great. But let's just be wary of time, the only resource. So I work on the Brigade program at Code for America here in San Francisco, and I gave a session at the pre-summit for Brigade members on Tuesday that was about this topic. And it was based on some numbers that we received from a survey that we sent out to the Brigade, the National Brigade Listserv. That was some pretty basic demographic questions, because we'd never had a baseline before of what do people who come to Brigade meetings look like. It's not very scientific, but it is at least some semblance of numbers that we can talk about and not just talk about the idea of inclusion. So close to 500 people answered the survey, and of those 500 people, close to 300 had attended or currently attend Brigade events in person. Everything from big National Day of Civic Hacking, huge events, to the daily or weekly rather attendance at Brigade Hack Nights. So of those approximately 300 people who responded that come to Brigade events in person, we saw some demographic breakdowns that were 75% of them are male, and of the rest, there was one person that identified as transgender and 2 people who did not respond as to their gender. The rest were female, so it's about 25% female. The overwhelming percentage, super overwhelming percentage of attendees were white, self-identified as white, and the next highest was something 8% for Asians, and then it was just all really minuscule compared to that from there. In terms of how much money folks make, most folks, a good 60 to 70% of folks are making between $50,000 and $120,000 a year, and almost nobody had less than a bachelor's degree who was attending, and very few age-wise. There were very, very, very few people who were in high school or just out of high school, or even mainly in college. And after about age 50, attendance drops off a lot too. So we've got this kind of picture, right? It sounds a lot like the tech industry. And what we have from that information is not really answers, but only hypotheses as to what we can do to shift this, because Code for America is not the civic tech movement. We are not the movement, but we are this obviously large and important force by virtue of money and by virtue of the convenings that we're having right here. So making the brigades represent the communities that we're in is really important for a mission that has to involve everybody and be with all the people that are trying to build society in a better way. So I've got some hypotheses on what to do and how to help brigades organize in their own communities to solve these issues. But I guess I want to know first if anybody has any reactions to those numbers. Are they surprising, expected?
Also, just to piggyback, either both reactions, and then has anyone else tried to start with a survey when they're assessing or trying to kick off a conversation about diversity or moving to a proactive state? I think either. And just yeah, let's do it. Do it.
Oh, no, I was just saying yes to start.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Actually, quick show of hands. How many? So, I guess this is a two-part question. If you don't, and then we'll go and unpack this. So, number one, either with whatever level of formal or informal institution you've worked with, and it could be past tense or present tense. How many of you have had diversity conversations at work? How many of those conversations were just about race and no other form of diversity? Anyone have conversations about diversity of any other type except for race? Would somebody mind talking about what that was? Sarah?
Thank you. I think that conversation mainly was about gender, but it was in a very binary way. Yeah, and mainly around, how not to discriminate and what sexual harassment is and all the stuff that I think a lot of organizations are legally required to do. So it's more like checking a box.
Of the folks who just had their hands up for the non-race conversations, how many of you were having these conversations about gender? Okay. And how many of you can identify a diversity conversation you had with an institution that wasn't about race or gender? All right, let's hear it. Could somebody? Yeah, let's go that way. Sorry, I just kicked in.
So we've talked a lot about socioeconomic diversity, age diversity, and ethnic diversity in our city.
Can I add, also we talk about renters versus homeowners because we try to include everybody in the conversation.
Anyone else want to? I think that's also just going back to Preston's comment about the survey. What's important to think about is we're actually just talking about literally being more inclusive of more types of people, but we tend to group it around different categories. But I want to refocus back on the survey because I wonder also if folks want to dig into this particular point.
Yeah, how do y'all feel about that the community organizations of the civic tech movements, big nonprofit supporter are demographically so normative?
I am a brigade captain for Tulsa, Oklahoma. I think if you asked another question, you asked, have you ever volunteered for any political organization before? I think we have a lot of people who this is their first time to step into that arena either. And I feel like a lot of our job is just to educate folks about how their government works, how their society works. So I think you're seeing a lot of people who have no exposure to the diversity in their own community. They're like people showing up for their first Habitat for Humanity volunteering session or something like that.
Interesting point. Does anybody have reaction to that?
No, it does.
Oh, sorry.
While the numbers aren't exactly surprising, is my understanding correct that brigades are self-identified? They step forward as opposed to being actively recruited?
That's right.
Okay. I think that explains a lot of it right there. That's not a slight against Code for America, but just probably the prime explanation. On the second one, the biggest distinction for me with these conversations in large organizations is I am seeing positive movement moving beyond sort of bureaucratic checkbox compliance, but the conversation moving from there to defensive, right? Preventing active racism, active classism, active ageism, ... And those conversations are so exhausting, right? That we never get to like offensive capabilities, or rather positive capabilities, right? Like how do we become inclusive as opposed to just preventing ourselves from being exclusionary?
That's a good point.
Has anyone crossed that threshold? Like beyond just having like a antagonistic, self-revealing conversation? Yeah.
Just in direct response to that, so brigades are self-selected, but they're self-selected based on how we present them. And in Preston's earlier talk, this session about inclusion, we were talking about messaging and how a lot of brigades present themselves as hack nights. They're very, like on Meetup, Code for Boston is connected with all the tech keywords, and that's how people find us. But if we framed ourselves as more of a community organization, I think there would be a more diverse self-selecting group. So it's not just people coming to us, but also the way we present ourselves to the world.
Messaging is a big part of it, right? Anybody else have something that they've done to actively try and move past these barriers?
Well, actually, I'd love to just pick up on that. Do we think that messaging is enough, or can somebody talk about how they've used messaging to either address certain inclusivity issues or successfully address inclusion? Because I think that's a really interesting point, right? There's a whole issue that we have around the language that we use and who we're talking to. But there's also a part of me that thinks that we can like constantly re-edit ourselves till our faces turn blue, and that's not necessarily going to cross a threshold.
That's fine. I'm gonna get fit today.
I'll try and just talk about that one thing. So we've tackled that a lot on multiple levels around messaging and visuals, because the messaging that CFA initially suggested and then we adopted and tweaked is definitely awkward in Oakland. We talk about citizens and very geeky terms and pro-government, and in Oakland the community doesn't trust government largely, and the idea of citizen is exclusive because it suggests that if you're an undocumented immigrant, then that's not for you. And so the language we've had to adapt a lot and change to be relevant to our community. But also the visuals, like we took a really great poster for the first National Day of Civic Hacking that Molly developed when she was not part of CFA, and we tweaked it and put it out, and as soon as we printed it, we realized we left the colors red, white, and blue, and that's just bullshit in Oakland. Like, that's not a cool thing. It doesn't resonate. It says a really bad message to people that this is some pro the man kind of thing, and that was a mistake. And everything else we've done then, we've tweaked the heck out of it and actually made it representative of the type of imagery that Oakland needs and feels. So there's a lot of small things that actually do matter to how you present yourself and how this stuff comes off to people that you want to be part of this work. So small, simple.
You should keep holding the mic for 1 second, because I'm curious when you're talking about it not resonating. That's often something I think we emotively feel, but some of us aren't in the position to then immediately make a change based on that, right? Like often you have to run up the chain, and people are like, whatever, we have a design now. So I'm curious how, like, one, you identified that, and two, how you either did or would start a conversation to address that.
We're a little spoiled. We got feedback pretty quickly from a couple of people in community organizations very directly. So that was very quick, prompt feedback. So that was easy to learn, but I'm a little bit lucky because of the work I do out of Code for America, which is very much embedded in the neighborhoods of Oakland. So we have a lot more connections and a lot more awareness of that, of those issues and how to present things and work with people inclusively. So I guess we're kind of lucky, but we still struggle with, we have really wonderful gender diversity within the brigade, but we're still too white. And so we're actually now working with someone who's used to be working with KPOR Center, but is now a consultant that actually does this work in large tech firms, that's actually going to work with us to figure out some strategies. And most of it's proactive, because we've talked about it and been concerned about it for a while, but that hasn't changed it. So it's this isn't something we can just step back and say, well, we care about it. We have to actually be doing stuff and being where people are at, which goes against meeting City Hall and a hack night. It's be part of the city that you're actually representing, which is a very different model.
It's worth underscoring. I see a couple hands over here. Thank you, Preston.
I'm not a brigade captain, just participate some in the Asheville Brigade, but one of the thoughts is, even if you completely fix your messaging, if different people show up the likelihood that you're going to have anything that speaks to people who don't kind of fit the current model is very, very low. And so a lot of it is thinking about, well, what does it mean to actually engage a different group of people? It's hard to engage somebody who doesn't code, let alone somebody who comes with a completely different worldview.
Yeah, that on that point, I think that's a lot about the messaging that we were talking about earlier. Like, engaging someone who doesn't code suggests that there's still a lot in our message, whether that's coming from Code for America's position of power and sort of like de facto primacy, I guess, in some of the conversation, or it's coming from the way that we're organizing our communities, like the way that we're messaging this does something to turn people away, to feel like they're like don't have the power to code, they don't have the power to affect something through the channel that we are building, or they don't want to be a part of building that.
Well, I just want a snarky footnote and then be quiet. It is called Code for America, so there's a pre-selection process that has created a value statement about whose skills are welcome. But you also had your hand up, and then Carrie.
So I'm Steve Clift with eDemocracy in Minneapolis, and we are while we're the fiscal agent and the host for Open Twin Cities, we're part of that broader civic tech movement. I've been around since actually '94, so a long time. We had a city camp. I was looking up online. So we did. Key thing is to ask. So City Camp is an unconference series. At 11 o'clock, there's a session about it. So it's a great bridging kind of event that brings both the tech crowd, the open government advocate crowd, and et cetera together. So we did a survey. We had 174 registrants. 30 were people of color. 11 were immigrants. Or first generation, 24 were under 25, and 29 were from greater Minnesota or rural Minnesota. And the key lesson from that is ask, right, and measure along the way. We had actually a higher percentage, I think, that actually turned out there were people of color. But why, right? So one of the reasons why, it built on 5 years of inclusive civic engagement work that we've been doing online related to Neighbors Online. And so we used census data to map out the diversity in St. Paul. We hired a team that spoke 10 different languages for summer jobs to go door to door. We signed up 4,000 people, most of them at the door. Half the people who fill out the survey who answered, there's a paper survey when they fill out the form, they were people of color. And it was probably the best funded inclusive online engagement project. $625K over 3 years, comes to a close at the end of this year. Tons of lessons to share, but what I can say is that city camp would not have had the Science Museum's teen tech program, 95% students of color. They wouldn't have bought a dozen people, or 10 people, had we not had those relationships. But when you build those relationships, you can move it forward. The last thing I'll say is that the key thing is there's sort of inclusive engagement into civic tech, like as you produce things with people. But there's also inclusive engagement in terms of how people use and engage and make it part of their everyday life. And the last thing I'll say is it's much easier for us to have gotten people into the room, digital room, on these neighborhood spaces, but to have those spaces reflect that diversity and have it be a bridge builder across race, immigrant, native born, that is a life's work, I think.
I was just going to bring up the point about professional diversity or role diversity. And when we had the Hack for Change this past, May, a lot of the folks talked about I didn't know technical writers could come. I didn't know designers could come. I didn't know that, my skills would be something useful to you. And we did, the organizer, the university in town, did a really good job of getting the diversity numbers up. But more work could be done just letting people know the role that they can play. And I think before I got this job, I knew about Code for America, but that wasn't something for me because I don't code. And code makes me uncomfortable, kind of the opposite of my friend across the room. But knowing that there's a role to play, and I've learned, over the past 5 years a lot about technology, and so I know what role I play in technology, and I'm very comfortable with that. But maybe being cognizant about our language and how we attract people to the role that they can play opens up diversity from another angle.
I want to unpack that in 1 second, but both Carrie, your comments and Stephen, yours. brought up something that I'm kind of obsessed with that I'm also curious to see if folks are putting into practice. So very often when we have these conversations about diversity, they're in reaction to something like, oh my God, we have to hire something and we're all white, or like we're a bunch of dudes. Like there's always like a chaos point, and which means that we're letting it boil to a chaos point instead of having proactive conversations about what inclusion means for our organization, our community, whatever. But both resonant in the theme of like the language that we use and how we're doing this kind of outreach, and then also you talked about playing this long game, means that we need longer timelines. We need to think about this from day zero with an organization or a program. And that's how I feel. And then I'm constantly in work environments where it's chaos, like it's madness, and it's really hard to make an argument in a chaotic point. So, and I guess one of the things I wanted to pull out of the themes that you just brought up, in addition to also seeing if anyone's had experience using different language to talk about civic tech and like bridge some boundaries, I'm also would love if somebody's like, we are awesome at proactive inclusion, and you immediately raised your hand. And they're awesome.
I raised my hand immediately, but I'm not necessarily going to answer the exact question you asked. So
that's totally fine.
One of the things about language that always bugs me is like, there's one thing about how can we find a better way to sell what we already have, but then I think there's also a question of what are we offering and what are we actually working toward. And I've been around a few different brigades, and there's some stuff that people are building, which is great, but isn't necessarily as relevant to like the communities that we may want to reach. And so I think part of the question is like, if we all hold up the mirror to ourselves, and I work in philanthropy, so I try to do this all the time, it's often pretty difficult. What work do we want to engage people in, and like what's in it for them, and why should they do it with us?
Feel free to jump on that too.
Jill, actually.
And then we got over here.
Hi, so I'm Code for Charlotte's co-captain for the brigade, and we very proactively recruit outside of just coders. I'm not a coder, and my co-captain is, so it's a great division of power between the two of us. He handles whatever the hell an API is, and I do the other stuff. But we actively go out to the different meetups. One of the things we did right from the beginning was go through meetups and look at ones that are not tech, because we've always framed ourselves as a civic group, and look at Latino meetups and stuff, and start making connections with them. And we go and we talk to them. Mostly I go and talk to them and introduce them to Code for Charlotte and what we're doing. About half of our active projects right now have very little technical stuff in. We actually build the project and then hand it over to the coders, and then they do their voodoo on it and make it show up on the internet. So I think that because our division of power is that way, it has brought in that idea right from the very beginning. Because if it was just a bunch of coders, I would sit there and twiddle my thumbs in the corner. And that's a bit more than I'm willing to do for this much time frame.
Sorry, do you want to?
No, I'm just highlighting that we got a bunch of hands.
Oh, sure.
I saw some over here. Go for it. Press me.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm going to go for it for a moment. What you just said about going out to different folks in the community in different ways reminded me of something that I shared in the Level Up Inclusion talk at the Brigade Pre-Summit. How many of you were not at the Brigade Pre-Summit, by the way? Really quick, raise your hands. Okay, good. So, that's right, we're not. So there'll be some new things to hear. One of the action points that's like one of the hypotheses. I recently went on this road trip to 5 different brigades. I went to Detroit and I went around the Southeast to different brigade meetings, and I saw some things that were like working great and some things that needed improvement, and kind of like could understand what are the common things that you do or don't do that lead to certain results. And one thing like you were mentioning, Jill, is when you go to work with other communities, has to do with like literally meeting people where they're at. How many of you have had happy hours for your brigade hack nights, or have beer at your hack nights? Kind of generally have this like, let's drink beer at hack night kind of thing going on. Raise your hand high. Elbows straight when you raise your hands. Okay. How many of you have had a potluck with your brigade, or for any kind of brigade related event? Raise your hands high. Much fewer. How many of you have met on a weekday night? Yeah, how many of you have not held your hack nights on a weekday night? So very few, right? How many of you meet in either a co-working space or like a company, office?
Environment.
Raise your hand high. How many of you meet inside a YMCA or other like
A library,
or-
church basement, anything.
At all?
Ever.
Raise
There
your
we
hands
go.
high. Right. So a lot of the things we do are normative to the culture that is coming to the table, which is all of those demographics I mentioned earlier from the Brigade survey. And being present in those other places in partnership with the folks who maintain and run those spaces is one thing that clearly changes the makeup and power networks of the groups that we're a part of. So if you want something to do, I highly recommend that folks look at like building bridges with people who manage other places other than the ones that we're used to, actually go outside the comfort zone of the Brigade and be changed and transformed by that action.
Well, and I would just say, and then I want to go over to you with the mic too, but this applies even if you're not a brigade, right? So I've worked in nonprofits for a long time now, and also I was a journalist and I've worked in government. And this applies as much to all three of those organizations because you have your fundraising events, you have community meetings, or you have coalition meetings. Even, again, one of the themes from the panel I was on yesterday that I hope somebody takes me up on that works in government is like going out to block parties and community festivals. Like there are also temporary spaces that people create in communities that we can be using for outreach and for like both active and passive communication. But I want to respect the mic. You're on.
Is it okay if I throw the entire discussion back to the language thing?
Do it.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, good. I'm from Germany and I'm part of the Hackers Club, the Chaos Computer Club. And it's strongly like we have this very dominant image of a wild male hacker, and we have the Chaos Communication Congress every year in December. And last year I did the Chaos Mentors program for the first time, where we invite new people to come, and that was very unveiling and unwrapping like the fear that a lot of people have. So we had 120 mentees, of which many people were women, and we figured that just alone showing that we had a slight notion of the problematic situation that women feel intimidated by per default and don't feel welcome by per default showed us that just alone communicating that we want to have women, and in German language we have this concept of gendering, so we use the female form as well, which appealed so much more to women. And we had like young women coming who were systems engineers, who were really into Illuminati books and everything, but they told us that they didn't know whether they would fit to the Congress because they don't feel like hackers. And it showed us that just talking, like speaking up that we want to have women really like proved a default assumption wrong that by many women that they don't feel welcome. So expressing it really is an important first step. And also showing by having a code of conduct, by using specific language, that you are aware of these kind of things that they are afraid of.
It's huge. Bill. Thanks for sharing that.
Going along with language again, that kind of made me think. I feel like I'm constantly trying to figure out how to find the core essence of what this movement is, which I think is very much we all can impact the places we live. The problem is that's so vague that it doesn't resonate. And like I was talking yesterday in another session that was about storytelling, and it seems like that's our core, but we then always talk about techie stuff because I think, well, many of us are techies, and that resonates in a way. But then it's, as I said, like if it becomes vague, then people see that and they think, I have no idea what that is. I have no idea if I'm welcome, because there's nothing in the messaging to indicate whether I am welcomed or not welcomed.
Yes. You brought up one of my favorite. I want to jump this over to you, but one of my favorite pieces of chaos for the work that I do is that we don't have a vision. I will just say we are really bad at one, visibility, and two, we don't have a vision, because it can't be efficiency. Because if it's about efficiency, about government efficiency, then we can only improve the efficiency of the system that we're in. And what we're all identifying is that the system that we're in, when it gets translated into a variety of contexts, both in and out of government, ends up with like huge structural inequalities, and that's ridiculous. None of us come to work every day to like reinforce that system. And I think, anyway, one of the prevalent themes that people keep bringing up that I just want to make sure I'm reflecting back is proactively messaging, not just about inclusion, but about the soul of the work that we're doing and who gets to be involved, is actually one of like the best pieces in our arsenal to start changing, not just who's involved, but also why we're doing the work. So I don't know if you want to jump back, but first go to that gentleman.
All right, sure. We've got 5 minutes left.
Preston, this man had his hand up first.
Sorry. I got Amy first, and then.
Okay.
Yeah. There you go.
Oh, good. Oh, good, Amy.
So I'm gonna be like super honest, and you ignore the fact that you know where I work. But I think also there's the element of like, I think we try, we do want to go to different venues and like, not have the unconference in the same places we do and try to get into the community. And at some point you're just like, oh man, that's really hard. They have no Wi-Fi and we have to go bring our Wi-Fi and that's like a whole other cost. And, going to a school building that does not have Wi-Fi for an unconference with like, 500 people. And then there are other things where like when you're trying to hire developers, and this is a current thing we're working on right now, and we go out of a way, we think we go out of the way and we try to outreach to different communities, and we're like looking at the applicants are coming in and we're trying to do it blind, and we're like, okay, we're gonna hold out. At some point there's work to be done, and you make choices and you hire, and then you get 3 more white dudes. And that's, and they're really competent and they're great people and we're glad to have them on the team. But at some point, I think this is also a really hard conversation to have internally. Like, at what point do you actually go the extra step to be like, okay, we actually really care about this. We will pay to Wi-Fi a whole damn building if we need to. And like, I think these are the hard choices where like, you have to look at finances and you have to look at your core values and your goals and be like, this is something we actually really care about. And I think that's the hard part that oftentimes as organizations, like we don't take that step because it's really hard.
That's an awesome point.
Speak. I think we might need to wrap up.
All right. Thanks. As a non-coder as well, and being surprisingly able to attend this, thanks to Granicus, who paid my way for a phone entry contest. But hey, the digitally illiterate are those that we need to reach out to as well. And obviously, that's part of the end users of all of these. And so every conference that I hope to ever attend, I always look at who should attend, read through it. If I'm vaguely possibly included in that group, I might make a pitch to my boss, say, hey, can I attend? But programmatically, as well as these brigade meetings, there are different approaches, obviously. And so I've heard some wonderful ideas here, and thank you all. So the even though I'm not a non-coder, I'm not digitally illiterate, but I can help contribute some perspective, but knowing that I was welcome and feeling welcome here, thank you all.
We got a hand right here too. Oh, Mark.
Sure.
Thanks, Preston. I think one of the things that strikes me about this process and a lot of the questions we've asked today is that there is an inherent need for curiosity about the people that we want to include and the people that we serve. And I think that there is a distinct need for some research, for some user experience components that need to be enveloped into what we are doing. I am not a member of a brigade, but I'm a government employee and work very closely with many brigade members and a few fellows and accelerator companies. And one of the things that's very inherent in all of their processes is user experience. And I think we need to turn that inward and employ that concept on what we're trying to do and who we're trying to reach and why we're trying to reach them. So curiosity, I think, is probably one of the leading components of why we're here.
Yeah, go ahead.
Center. Just really quickly, the Kapor Center for Social Impact, founded by Mitch Kapor, we focus on diversifying the tech sector, and we're doing it with a sense of urgency because we know that systems and cultures calcify over time, and if we're going to diversify the tech sector, it has to happen kind of now at the earliest stage to have its most transformative impact. Just one reflection I'm having from this conversation is what's interesting was when I went from kind of social justice organizing to electoral civic engagement work to now being in the tech sector. It was very clear once we got into the tech sector that tech was a skill set, right? Internally, our entire staff learned how to code, right? It was very clear if we're going to go into the tech sector, we have to learn these kind of clear steps, A, B, C, D, right? It's a skill set. The hard thing was when talking about social justice, when talking about diversity in particular, the feedback or the sense I got from a lot of people was that while coding and tech was a skill set, social justice, diversity was a mindset. And when you do that, you kind of perpetuate it because then you lose, as the person over there said, you lose the scope of the problem, right? Diversity comes out of larger institutional structures that's been perpetuated over years. And so my encouragement and why we do what we do at the Kapor Center and why we focus exclusively on diversity in tech is because it is its own ecosystem. And so as you all go back, my encouragement would be to approach the issue of diversity not as like, what are these small acts of engagement, which are oftentimes kind of too late, right, or too far in the process. We're too often addressing the symptoms or the kind of not addressing the root cause. And so that's why I'm super grateful for Spike and Open Oakland for actually investing in paying for a consultant who has decades of experience at diversity to change the culture, right? It's an understanding of the level of the problem, but also the possibility, right? Once you start investing in this, it can change all of us for the better, and the experience, I guarantee you, will be awesome. And so just thank you also for all coming out here and engaging in this talk as well.
Yeah. Mario, I want to, so we're just about out of time here, but I really want to underscore a couple of things that you just said and that came out in the last part of this conversation. We just filled a room to have a conversation about basically how we're not able to have a conversation about diversity and inclusion in our settings. The reason why we're here is because we recognize that there's like an innate humanness in other people that needs to be involved, and we're constantly in environments that are like based on rationality and denying humanness, denying the fact that like if your organizational mission is, say, about transparency or about wireless, that you can't also inherently value diversity as part of your mission. That's crazy. This is when we're talking about the kind of like transformative long-term vision. I guess I want to underscore that don't let people tell you it's not practical to include this as part of every mission, because it is a mindset, not a skill set. Don't also think that a conversation isn't productive, because we're all here because we're trying to find the answer. If we're not able to have these conversations in our context, then we're never going to start articulating answers. There are communities that are actively working in this space in more visible ways. One thing Preston really wants everyone to go to, and I totally agree, is the Allied Media Conference. It happens in Detroit every year, and actually next year we're going to have a whole track on community technology, which is a whole other flavor. But the other thing I want to make sure that just leaving it to underscore is about visibility. So if you, one way to be visible is to start this conversation at home or to have a connection. We're going to cut in 1 second, I know. Let everybody go. But if you are also dissatisfied and you still want more, come up and say hey, and we'll start either an email list or some conversation. But thanks for being here.
Thank you.